everyone. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Rung Tepkeo. I'm the Membership Engagement Manager at PADA, the Pacific Asia Travel Association. And this is a new episode of PADA Spotlight. So for those of you who are not familiar with PADA Spotlight is a webinar series hosted by PADA in cooperation with our many members. So for this Spotlight, we have actually partnered up with our member Lotus Voyager group and their learning platform, which is LVG Learning, and you will hear about that more in a bit. So today's topic is why tourism does need an education. And our speaker today is Patrick Richards, who is the non-executive director of LVG Learning. I'm sure he will say a few words about himself in a few seconds as well. But basically, Patrick has a lot of experience in the travel and tourism industry, over 35 years. And I'm very excited what he has to say about, the education industry or the education and tourism, and what are the changes, what can we do, all that kind of stuff. Before we jump into the topic, I would like to say a few words about how this webinar is going on. So we will have a presentation, and if you throughout the webinar have any questions, please feel free to submit them in our Q&A box, because after the presentation, there will be some time where Patrick is going to answer some of those questions. So use the Q&A box that we have. It should be at the bottom of your page. Please don't use the chat function. All the questions in the chat function, in the chat room, they will just disappear throughout the time when people keep chatting. So yeah, just submit them in the Q&A box and we'll try to answer them after the webinar. I also know that many of you always ask us if the recording and the slides will be available. Yes, the recording will be available on YouTube, and the slides will be shared with PADA members after the webinar as well. So I think I haven't forgotten anything. So without further ado, I would like to officially welcome Patrick Richards. Good morning, Patrick.
Good morning, Rung. Thank you for the warm welcome. And good morning to everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. I'm just going to share my own screen.
That looks good.
Looks good.
Yes.
Great. So yes, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks to Rung and thanks to the PATA team for giving us this opportunity. And thanks to you all for taking the time out of your busy day. It's really appreciated. My name, as Rung said, is Patrick Richards. I started back in the travel business on April the 1st, April Fool's Day, 1985. So have had a long career throughout the business in many different areas. And I'm delighted to be here with you today. And our subject is "We don't need no education. Is this the travel business mantra?" So, we don't need no education. So sang the rock band Pink Floyd back in 1979. Unfortunately for the travel business, this has too often been the case. Years ago, I remember an old boss of mine haranguing me for wasting money in putting forward a £15,000 training budget to support £2 million worth of headcount budget. And I think this mindset is really pervasive in tourism, where the vast majority of private sector businesses routinely underinvest in their people. And in the next 25 minutes or so, I'll be presenting a case to outline the detrimental impact on travel and hospitality. And really to stress that this can get worse unless we change our mindsets and take concerted action. So really the title of this then becomes why tourism does need an education. So if any of you were hoping that I would rail against education for the next half an hour, or maybe hum along to the tunes of Pink Floyd, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed, as we're really going to focus in on why tourism does need an education. So let's start. In many respects, tourism has been the star pupil in the classroom of the global economy. Let's look at some of these figures, which are WTTC numbers. Travel accounts for 1 in 10 jobs globally. It accounts for 1 in 6 new jobs created. And in G20 countries, from 2010 to 2019 decade, tourism growth was 32%, and that has outstripped the overall economic growth in those countries by 300%. But beneath these rosy headlines lies some deeper problems. Tourism consistently lags behind the rest of the economy in productivity. I'm going to take some UK figures here, but in 2015, the UK's Office of National Statistics, the ONS, really released some stark figures on travel's poor performance. It stated that in terms of GVA, which is gross value added, on similar levels of employment, tourism produced only 55% of the value of the construction sector and a truly woeful 28% of the value of the manufacturing sector. So as a consequence, pay in tourism was on average 1/3 lower. So it looks like tourism is great at finding first jobs for people. For example, again, in the UK, 34% of people in the industry were under 25, which compared to 12% for all other sectors. However, we seem to fail to build on that great start. And why? Because young people fail to stay in the industry, which doesn't invest in them. Let's look at some of the icons on this slide. Poor performance, staff turnover in the sector is up to 30%. Career paths are ill-defined. And frankly, you know, there's not a career path for professional attainment like there are in many other sectors. And this means that young people fail to stay in the industry. And of course, the worst one of all here is 41% of travel companies don't have a training budget. And there's some their numbers from the UNWTO. So by falling short on education, we don't compare well with other more professionalized industries with those benchmark attainment status. So given these realities of underperformance, no wonder politicians fail to take our sector seriously, feeling ourselves undervalued. And then on top of all of this came the pandemic. 174 million jobs destroyed in 2020. These are our WTTC figures. They need to be verified, but the WTTC estimate that 174 million jobs have disappeared, and that was from 330 million jobs globally. So the spell has now been broken. Tourism can no longer be seen as an unstoppable job creating machine. Great people have left the sector permanently and taken crucial skills and experience with them. Additionally, young people looking to build a career may well not want to join an industry which neither offers job security, or professional progression. So again, let's look at some of the points on the slide. It's predicted that there will be a return to 2019 job levels by 2024 to 25. But in what form will those jobs come back? And I think anybody who's thinking that this will be business as usual is really is dreaming, because upskilling and reskilling will be essential in the face of economic uncertainty. 92% of business leaders saw transformational change to their companies. In other words, change today is ubiquitous. And to stay ahead in the competition, companies from every industry are looking for ways to improve. And as per the last point here, this says embracing new technologies, shifting strategies to diversification, and for sure, development of their workforce. So how will tourism respond in attracting talent when the rebound arrives? Well, in one sense, very well. Until the last year, I think travel was also a laggard in IT. However, the pandemic has changed all this. Tech adoption has reached really quite dramatic levels, especially in areas such as contactless. However, ironically, this may exacerbate travel's productivity issue. So let's look at the other half of the equation. How are we going to find the talent to be able to staff the technology revolution? 73% of delegates at the World Economic Forum, WEF, cited that machine learning is critical for the future. 40% of AI jobs, and everybody talks a lot about AI, but 40% of AI jobs globally, and this is an OECD number, say that those jobs are vacant because they can't find the right skills. And it looks a lot like, once again, tourism hasn't woken up, because 45% of companies in tourism have no plans to adopt robotization. That's a UNWTO figure and a UNWTO word, by the way. I'm not sure I'm familiar with robotization, but still. So look, overall, it means that potential jobs, which are both highly skilled and durable, are remaining unfulfilled. And this is not the only area of future growth. Millions of green jobs will be created in the future in the carbon neutral revolution. And 85% of WEF delegates also said that skill sets in big data were in the highest demand. So will travel and tourism response be agile and capture the talent it needs for the future rebound? Too often, the narrative is, oh, we're in a fight for survival, so can we afford to invest in education? Well, I'd reverse the question and say, can you afford not to invest in education? A recent survey by Skillsoft looks at some of the answers. And organizations need to adapt more quickly than ever. The cost of poor knowledge to companies is equal to 8% of annual revenues. And better information can generate a whacking 40% improvement in customer satisfaction. So in adapting, employers really face greater challenges than making sure the Wi-Fi of their home workers is working particularly well. I really think that we're on the cusp of a fourth industrial revolution. And in terms of dramatic impact, let's equate it to those agricultural workers who in the 18th century laid down their plows and moved to the city to work in a factory. Companies need to adapt rapidly to a less hierarchical structures, where networking, partnerships, and innovation can foster growth. Companies are also going to be held to higher ethical standards, and employees need to have the skills to be able to protect their employers when these points hit. So really, future winners will be agile to all of these challenges. And what's the key? It's a highly skilled and educated workforce will be critical to success. So where should travel enterprises target in the future? From the previous slides, one might gather that all future employment is destined to be in the tech side. Not so. Let's look at this slide. So a UNWTO survey identified 4 key areas. 68% and the highest was in IT, 38% was in data analytics, and 23% was in leadership. But let's look at this one, 53% good old customer service, which is still the second highest area in demand. And frankly, this is not a new thing. Again, a UK example. The UK ONS found that 61% of tourism employers struggled to find the customer service skills that they need. And of course, that underperformed the rest of the economy by a huge 30%. Again, I think this situation is likely to get more acute. Tourism, in my view, is likely to become more complex. Let's think about it. Customers now want unforgettable experiences, and COVID has only accelerated this trend. Demand is also increasing for rural, less populated, and thus less well-known destinations. So travel professionals are well placed to deliver these experiences, but only if they're able to grasp the opportunities to grow their expertise. So I've added one of my own to the UNWTO, and that's destination knowledge. With consumers becoming ever more sophisticated, the knowledge of the travel professional will need to exceed their clients if they're to add value. And let's look at it also, destination marketing professionals will need to convey ever more complex and nuanced messages to meet customer expectations. And then that will need to be followed throughout the sales process where the travel professionals pick this up. So really, overall, a few things are clear. One, that tourism is going to transition away from a legacy labor-intensive approach with a greater investment in skills. 2, the payback for this will be a more attractive industry for talent, greater loyalty, productivity, and salaries. And 3, the talent must also be sourced across gender, race, and using all ages, older workers, value, younger workers, etc., to bring into the mix to maximize the talent. So I don't think it's news to anyone on this call that we're in the midst of a new tech revolution. And it follows that e-learning should play a pivotal role. E-learning affords people the freedom to fit education into their busy lives at a time and a place that suits them. It also addresses the huge geographical and demographic challenges posed by educating populations in key emerging markets, such as India and China. And it also gives a platform for great educators, wherever they may be, to engage and enthrall an infinitely wider audience. And let's look at how e-learning is set to grow. So already from a strong base in 2015, we've seen substantial growth to 2020. But look at how the curve is going to go. From 2020 to the next 5 years to 2025, we're looking at a doubling of growth from 190 billion to a 375 billion industry. These are stats from Global Market Insights showing the growth. But where's the catch? Well, let's look at the lady there in the slide. In some despair, I think it's a general exhaustion. Many CEOs and industry leaders report that engagement levels have fallen off a cliff. Initial levels of online enthusiasm from early 2020 have fallen away, with people being overwhelmed by webinar requests, newsletters, invitations to engage in some form or another. The level of noise has simply become a distraction, with people switching off. This is a problem that the online learning industry needs to address. So what can be done? Well, again, I'm going to return to my analogy of the fourth industrial revolution. All of us are coming to terms now in how to deal with the onslaught of living in a digital world. And we underestimate the impact and the change needed at our peril. So to address this, here are some ideas. One, we need strategies for learning. What do I or my employees need to know? Where do we source the information? How do we make sure we're taking the right courses? Two, allocate some quality time. You know, this should be part of the working week, to allocate time for education. Avoid distractions, the pings, the notifications, the chimes. Take those away and give quality time to focus on education. And finally, find a trusted source to access the information. So what does good e-learning look like? Well, I want to come back to this idea of a trusted source, which is so important. There's now so much free content of dubious quality. Think fake news. It's incumbent on us all to identify sources and manageable feeds of quality information and collateral that can challenge and develop us. Success requires a combination of personal discipline on behalf of the learner and leadership from the employers and the CEOs in communicating the right social contact with their teams. The industry has also successfully addressed previous roadblocks via a new generation of LXP, which is learning experience systems. And they bring in some of the icons on this diagram here. Gamification, social learning, personalized and curated content that is relevant for the employee's development. Upskill and reskill. The average person will make 5 to 6 career changes in their lifetime. Each of these will require reskilling. So what does this mean? Ultimately, it means that there's a personal responsibility on all individuals to manage their own career and manage their own career within the turbulence of the future jobs market and career transition. And the idea that in the past there was a world of education when you were young, and then that stopped, and then you moved into a world of work, is a redundant concept. Learning is now a lifelong pursuit. In emerging markets such as Asia, tourism growth may have been relentless, and hence the incentive to change may have been absent, but this is no longer the case. So all of us now need to keep pace with the world of constant and rapid evolution. So how do we at LVG Learning contribute to this environment? Well, LVG is a purpose-driven business, but we also believe in the free market and strongly believe that by aligning purpose with business, this is the most durable way for the company to be relevant in the future. We are the world's first learning experience platform dedicated to the tourism sector. And if you see, there's a development here on the slide from learning through to networking, through to B2B marketing. What does this say? Well, the link from digital learning to business development has been well proven in most industries. And by creating a forum where destination marketeers can spread their message by engaging with travel sellers, this automatically leads to business opportunities and various areas of product and destination promotion, which leads into the sales process. So to speak a little bit more to this journey, there's 9 points here which really outline how LVG goes around this. Firstly, we have a mission to champion talent and development in tourism professionals. We have an Asian focus, which is relevant to this forum with PATA. The courses combine soft skills, key business skills such as negotiation, plus destination learning. And those destination learning courses have a standard and clear format. And this enables DMOs and NTOs to drive engagement and attainment. And the user experience is optimized by gamification and personalization and some of those new techniques that we referred to in a good learning experience platform. The results are supported by data. In other words, controllers and HR can find out what's working and what's not working. We make the world a smaller place by then networking marketeers with buyers. And this creates business opportunities, which ultimately is also then a powerful digital marketing tool for NTOs and DMOs in the B2B channel. And we're committed to supporting the industry as the rebound begins. And this especially also applies to SMEs. So after this call, if any of you want to reach out to our team, they're ready to take your inquiry, and we'll be pleased to support you with some sample itineraries and some sample courses on a complimentary basis. So what does all this mean for the industry? Let's end with some positive thoughts. What benefits can this deliver? And I'm going to take a final stat from the ONS in the UK, which said a 1% rise in productivity would bring an extra 1.43 billion of revenue into the UK tourism sector alone. Now, let's extrapolate that number globally and think of the potential revenue that we can drive through upskilling and through productivity. And that's a good a piece of good news to end on. So thank you very much for your attention throughout this presentation. Here are some of the contact details, info@lvglearning.com. Please feel free to reach out to us, or of course on the left-hand side via social media. I think we're now going to, Rung's going to come back in, and we're going to look at some polls and take a few questions.
Yes. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for this informative presentation. And let's jump into, let's do the poll first, right? Before we go into the
I'm going to stop sharing a moment, so we're back on.
Yes. So we've prepared a poll for the audience, and the first two questions are coming up now. Before we are displaying the poll, I would like to ask all our wonderful students attending, please answer only the first question. The second question is for industry members at this point. So students, feel free to answer the first question as well, but the second, please leave it open. I think my colleague will now go ahead and share the poll. So we'll give you a bit of time to read and answer, so no rush there. Okay, I see we're getting answers. We'll wait a bit more because I know there's a bit of reading involved in this. Questions are still coming in. So I would say another maybe 20 seconds. So everyone has a chance to answer if they want to. Okay, 5 seconds. This is like a countdown. We don't want to rush it, but we also want to. Okay, I think, okay.
You're in the Space Center room.
Yeah. And 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's cut it off. We got a good amount of answers here. So yeah, I'm not sure. Can you see the answers, Patrick? Or is it just?
I certainly can.
Okay, so I will just share some of the answers here with you. So the first question was, what are the most important areas for you and your staff to upskill yourselves? Most, with 57% was the first one, adapt to the digital world. That was the #1 answer. I mean, this was a multiple choice. So the second most answered one was improve teamwork and interpersonal skills. Followed by deliver better customer service to our clients. And then the next one, get to grips with the new technology and automation, as well as familiarization by familiarize my team with with more complex destination products. And last but not least, secure better commercial deals. Is this surprising to you, Patrick, this kind of result, or?
No, I don't think it is at all. I think I think the two highest scoring areas, which were adapting to the digital world and improving interpersonal and soft skills, absolutely are consistent with some of the themes that I brought up in the presentation. So, you know, I think all power to our audience. They're you know, they're very well attuned to the developments in the industry.
Yeah, I think so too. So no big surprises here. So the second question was, how much time do you and your team spend upskilling yourselves online education and per month? So we kindly ask to have the students not answer this one. Thanks for your help with this. So most people spend 3 to 5 hours, followed by 1 to 2 hours. That's like the most common. And then the other 3 were around 10% each, with like no online education at all, or between 6 and 10 hours. Do we have a comment to this one?
So, yeah. So there's something called the 5-hour rule. And I'm thinking here that, you know, firstly, our audience here is going to be automatically skewed towards people who are more interested in education, because the guys who take, you know, who aren't looking at this webinar are probably going to be less interested in education. So we've all automatically got a more engaged audience. But I don't know if any of the guys out there have heard of something called the 5-hour rule, which was followed by such luminaries as Bill Gates, President Obama, Warren Buffett. They all dedicated 5 hours a week throughout their careers to learning. So times that by 4 roughly, those guys were all spending 20 hours a week on their own education. And they were set that time aside for upskilling themselves. In fact, Warren Buffett's partner, Charlie Munger, says, I've never come across a highly successful person who hasn't spent huge amounts of times on upskilling themselves as a constant throughout their careers. So think of it, those people are spending 5 hours a week, 20 hours a month on upskilling themselves, and they're pretty successful examples of people in our society.
Yeah. So yeah, actually the answers are then what we could expect as well. I just realized I think we can actually share the results. Is that correct? I'm just looking at my. So maybe we can share it, and then you and the audience can have a quick look before we start going into our Q&A session. Is that something we can do? Yeah. Okay. Yes. So I think now you can see it as well, Patrick. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just for you to have a quick look again, and the audience as well. This is what the answers were as we discussed just now. And let me know when you want to continue into our question.
Yeah, just remember that 3 to 5 hours on this question is per month, and the 5-hour rule I was talking about is per week.
Per week, yeah.
You know, they were looking at those guys, the Bill Gateses of this world, were looking at 20 hours a month. So, you know, I'd urge everybody to give that a little bit of thought as to allocating that time for upskilling and education, especially as the world is changing so quickly, so rapidly, and that change is really profound.
Yeah, agreed. Something I have to, yeah, I have to consider myself as well, actually. So yeah.
We all do. We all do.
Okay, thanks for that. So we'll stop sharing the poll results, and I think now we will jump into some questions. So once again, please feel free. I saw there are some questions that came in already, but we also got some questions in advance from people who were registered to the webinar. So we will start with some of the questions that we received with the registrations. So one of the first questions I wanted to ask, Patrick, is one of the functions of tourism itself is to inform and perhaps educate travelers. Is there anything to improve that aspect of travel in the future?
Well, that's a good question. Yes, and we've talked quite a lot about gamification in the presentation. With another hat on, I'm very involved in the sustainability industry with a business called Terra Verde Sustainability. And in that industry, there's some really good examples of what you're talking about. So, for example, in the past, where a hotel would leave a note to guests saying, "Oh, please reuse the towels," now there's some great apps which do this engagement at a far more interesting level. So, for example, everybody in the hotel, and this applies to eco hotels, but you know, you can see how it would spread. Every guest is on an app where their use of electricity and their use of water is being monitored on the app, and it's being shared with all the other guests in the hotel. So everybody can see who's used the least, who used the most, and there's an element of competition between the guests on conserving the electricity and the water. Even down to the fact that quite a few of them will have transparent water holders behind the shower, so each guest can see how much water they've used while showering and how that benchmarks against other users who've been in the hotel. So then there's a great Swedish app, Scandinavian app called Deedster, and again, consumers or staff can put this onto download it onto their phones, and they can automatically see what's their carbon usage, you know, what their various waste usage is. And of course, this gets people involved, and absolutely, this is a way for engaging consumers in the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, it's very interesting what you're just saying. honestly, I haven't heard about this thing where you actually can track your usage, or you will have like a display of, it's almost like a competition then, I guess, with the other guests.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Um, okay. We are getting questions, so I want to keep asking so a lot of the questions of the audience can be answered. One other question that I also saw, a similar one in the Q&A box, is what is the effect of the pandemic on the talent pool in the hotel and tourism industry? Very relevant for all of us, I believe.
Well, not good. I think I outlined that. In fact, catastrophic. 170 million people within tourism, according to the WTTC, have left. Now, whether those figures are right, I can't say, but they were the WTTC's estimates. But definitely a lot of ultra smart, dedicated, creative people have decided that their future lies outside of tourism. And that's pretty tragic for us. Now, if we had a talent deficit before, which I think I outlined on the slide, what's it going to be like afterwards? So, I'm a great believer in the power of healing. And I think this can come back, but it won't come back by accident. It'll come back if we make a concerted effort to change the mindset and really bring education much more central to our DNA of day-to-day business.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Yeah, I agree as well. So with that, let's jump maybe into another question. With online learning tools becoming very popular for like the different sectors, what is like, how do you transform the solution for tourism companies in a practical way?
I think, okay, so I think practical is the right approach. Firstly, you need to get buy-in, and I don't think buy-in should be left to an HR manager or a middle manager. It needs to have the buy-in of the CEOs, and the CEO needs to find a strategy around this. And that strategy doesn't need to be complicated, but it does need to be coherent, and it needs to be relevant and aligned with how they want to conduct their business and how they see their business growing in the future. So I'm urging everybody, firstly, to have a strategy for education that fits with their business. Secondly, it's got to be scalable. And thirdly, it's got to be cost effective. So scalable, it's all, a lot of people are doing online courses, but what online courses are they doing? Did they drop out? Did they complete the course? Was the course relevant to the business and to their skill sets? Collating and aggregating this information can be really quite a challenge. So finding ways and platforms to be able to aggregate and control that data is important. And finally, it needs to be cost effective and within the budget of tourism companies. And I don't think all e-learning platforms are. I think there's some that are extremely expensive, and tourism leaders take a look at them and shy away. So really there needs to be within the budget that they can incorporate into their operations.
Yeah, I agree. And like one point that you mentioned is, and I think you mentioned it in the presentation as well, and I think I don't know if I got a clear answer, but I think one thing that a lot of people are concerned about when doing these online classes, e-courses, is like, how's the quality of those classes, right? And then not just the quality, but also, is it recognized? How is it recognized by others, by other companies? These are some questions that I also saw from the audience in our Q&A already. In general, like, how is education, how can we ensure education is important when there's still so much work experience required, basically, from employees in the travel and tourism industry. So how can we find like a balance to that? Like, is there thoughts that you have about this?
I think it's a great point, and I think we have a long way to go. I think there are some interesting attempts at this. For example, the Travel Institute in the USA, who sets professional attainment standards, and I think that's exactly the way that we should look at our industry in developing our talents. How that the Travel Institute's program has developed with the changing needs of tourism, I can't speak to. You know, I'm not close enough to it. So it would be interesting to find that out. I'm not saying it is or it isn't. It does seem to have struggled to break out of a kind of silo of North America and being able to get any traction in Asia or in Europe. And again, that's just an impression. So, and I think that's a shame, because, you know, getting that any attainment program should be global. Of course, the other thing with the destination courses is they're endorsed by the NTO. So, you know, when you have that NTO endorsement, they're obviously putting all of their reputation and their time behind that. So there's a considerable endorsement factor there. So, you know, it's going to be a patchwork quilt. There's not going to be one professional standard, because that really doesn't exist anywhere. But we really should make efforts to capture the skills that are needed, translate them into a more structured professional development, and roll that across the industry. And I think you guys at PATA can play a major role in that.
Yeah, we're trying. We're working on it. And this also kind of connects what you've been saying, or what we've talked about, connects to another question or comment that we got from one of our registrants in advance. So this person is part of one of the PATA chapters in the US, and he basically explained how the past year has, of course, been tough for his business, but he also used the time to do one of the certificates by the Travel Institute. That's the name of the institute. So he did a certified travel industry executive certificate, and he said he's also doing PATA webinars, kind of to expand his knowledge for what's going to happen after, hopefully, this pandemic is, well, not going away, but everything is kind of going back to a new normal. And he's kind of preparing himself to be ready to offer new destinations to his client base, instead of, he had a focus on Europe before. So he said he would like to expand to the Asia Pacific region, or Asia region in his case. Yeah, so that's one of the comments that we got as well in advance.
Yeah, I saw that one, Rung, and I thought, well, my reaction was good on you. You know, one that he or she, I'm not sure whether it was a man or a woman, had taken the brave step and really decided to focus on Asia and move away from that kind of milk run which so many American travel advisors look at, which is either cruises or Europe, or cruises or Europe. And I think they were already seeing the payback from promoting Asian destinations. So, you know, good on them for being brave and really developing and backing that up with knowledge of with investing in themselves on destination knowledge and following the PATA courses. So, you know, frankly, I don't think I can offer any more advice to that person rather than keep doing what you're doing. You're doing some great stuff.
Yeah, thank you. We got some more questions in advance, but I also, since it's roughly 10 minutes left that we have, are you okay with answering some of the questions we got from the live audience?
Sure, yeah, of course.
Okay, so one question is, do you think governments should invest in tourism education? And if yes, in what way?
I'm tempted to say yes, because that's the obvious answer. My fear with it is one, governments have a lot of priorities at the moment. And where is this going to sit in government priorities, given all of the other things that they have to do? I think government should invest in tourism, that's for sure. And I think creating the right playing fields for tourism education should be a government role in getting that collaboration process together. And I've talked, a lot of the things I've talked about in my presentation were to do with the adoption. I wasn't really making a judgment on what travel educational establishments are out there, only that really the private sector within tourism has been too slow to adopt that education. So, what I do think that governments and we should be looking at as leaders of the industry should be having that collaboration between the education institutions to make sure what they're doing is absolutely relevant and absolutely attuned with the business needs of the private sector, so that eventually that can become more front and central to operations, and we can invest better in our workforce.
Thank you. Yeah. Going through the questions, there are a lot of interesting ones. We will not be able, unfortunately, to answer all of them, but I will forward them to Patrick, and if there's a name and an email attached to it, maybe you will answer.
I'd be pleased to answer, yeah.
Okay, so let me move forward. We still have some time, so maybe another 2 to 3 questions. Is that okay for you?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So here's one. How do you see education contributing to the development, to developing tourism into a more responsible and sustainable industry in the post-pandemic era?
Well, I think it speaks to the way that education has got to be able to develop pretty rapidly, and I'm not sure it has in all areas. I have a daughter of mine is at a university in the UK. She spends most of the time in her room and probably does a couple of webinars a week. So I think the universities do have to adapt and to keep pace with the furious pace of change that is going on. But I think adopting sustainable credentials, and I already said I'm very interested in sustainability, adopting sustainable criteria into those curriculum will be incredibly important. And if I talk about sustainability a moment, there's over 400 different certifications out there, and rather like we were talking about professional attainments, who's to judge on the quality and the robustness of those 400 certifications? I think there's a real open question. So really more and more on a sustainability level, we're moving towards science-based targets. In other words, carbon zero, that you can report on, that can be audited and can be measured. And 93% of large companies now report on their scope 1, scope 2, and their scope 3. And your scope 3, I don't want to go into too much technical detail, but scope 3 is effectively the supply chain and other people's emissions that impact on you. So 93% of businesses are going into their supply chain and wanting to measure those for science-based targets. Now, bringing that science-based thought process into university and college curriculum, I think is also pretty important. So when people arrive in the industry, they can bring that good practice into the industry.
Yeah, thank you. We have another similar question here, which is not focusing on sustainability specifically, but is asking what could be the role of academic and research scholars in reviving the tourism industry, like the tourism sector. once the situation is getting better?
Well, you know, I think I already said I'm a voracious reader. I spend 20 hours a month, hopefully, you know, reading and seeing. So, you know, research papers are great at informing me, and I lap them up. And I think they certainly have a role. You know, serious people looking into the detail, doing the research, making it robust, have a great role to play. I would say that those research papers need to be written for people who have, you know, I think I have quite a high level of tolerance for this stuff, Rung, but I can tell you if it's 9 o'clock at night and I think, oh, I'll just read that research paper, and I click on and I see it's 120 pages long and, you know, full with very, very dry kind of, I'm afraid I don't have the tolerance. So, you know, it's got to be kept to a manageable 30 pages or so. It should be written not so it's only shared with a few academic circles, but hopefully, you know, for a wider audience who can really learn from all of that good research that's being done. So, you know, that would be some of my advice: is think of presentation and think of making it palatable to a slightly wider audience.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, one more question, and then I know we have another poll for the audience before we close this webinar. So with engagement levels sometimes being like challenged, what is like your thought, like what are your thoughts about this? What can be done, like about people who have been like very engaged, especially when the pandemic started, and now it's like maybe a bit lower, like, yeah.
I'm smiling because this is my favorite topic.
It's
the curse of the digital age and how we're going to adapt. So there's a colleague of mine who tells a story. If you'll bear with me, I'll just go into this story a moment. And basically he found that he could not concentrate. He could not concentrate on all of the important thought, time-taking work that he had to do, because he was being distracted by emails and chimes and notifications and all of these things. So, you know, what did he do? He sold his smartphone and he bought a 1990s Nokia, one of these little 1990s Nokia that just send texts and receive calls. And then he found he was being distracted by his laptop because it was the internet and there were so many things. So he sold his laptop and bought a word processor which had no connection to the internet. And what did he find? He then would be walking to his desk and he'd see a book. He'd say, oh, I've been meaning to read that book, or I need to do the washing up. And he realized that the distractions are actually not coming external, they're internal. They come from within ourselves. And unless we train ourselves to make sure that we can be focused, it doesn't matter what you just strip away from the external, and you should strip away from the external, but, you know, unless you can concentrate yourselves and dedicate time where you shut out other things to important areas, then you won't overcome the problem. And, you know, I think there's another side to this, which is this will not all be nice. You know, great rewarding things don't always need to be nice. And a lot of the self-help industry focuses on happiness and that we should all be happy. No, worthwhile things do involve pain and difficulty. You know, otherwise we wouldn't have fought off woolly mammoths and cured diseases and done all of those sort of challenging things that human beings have achieved. But there's a great analogy on ponies. You know, we know that young people, often girls, but young people love ponies. But also being involved with ponies means mucking them out too. You know, for all nice things, there comes some pain. And by the way, isn't that a great, you know, isn't that a great business? One of the greatest businesses ever, these stables which not only need to muck out the ponies, they get young girls to come and pay them to muck out. So what a great business idea that is. But, you know, look, I think ultimately then bringing in, you know, having said all that, then bringing in some modern ideas like gamification, like personalization, that can make these things relevant to people is good. And it's like the research paper, you know, don't make the research paper 120 pages long or dry, make it 25 pages long, make it relevant, have some good infographics in it so people can immediately click on to the ideas that you're trying to convey. And these will make these things good. But ultimately, we need to be able to break away from this world where we're permanently being distracted by the latest chime and email, and move on to putting time aside for concentrating on really chunky, important things.
Thank you. I think that was a great last question, because I think that's really something that affects us all, no matter if we're students or employees or business owners. It's such a relevant topic, and it always will be, and especially with modern times, and like how we know everyone has such a short time of like being actually aware of things or paying attention to things, and it's getting shorter and shorter according to scientists. So I think it's so important that we keep being aware of this problem, if we would say so, and like making ourselves like, yeah, like if we focus and if we pay attention to it, reflect on ourselves, I guess there's a lot we can do from within ourselves. So before, as I said, we're a bit over time here, but we would like to have a second poll. So I want to encourage everyone, before you leave, please answer this second poll with another 2 questions, and we're putting it out now. Here it is. I think I will give you a minute, and then when the minute is up, we'll end the poll and we'll share the results, and we can quickly go over it. Okay, we're getting the first results in. We're having another 30 seconds here. Oh. This is interesting. Last 8 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and we're closing. Okay, Patrick, we'll share the results right now. I think they will be visible to everyone, so we can quickly go over it together. Do you see the results?
I certainly can. Yep.
Are you surprised?
Well, I think the first one shows that we still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But hopefully we might have, you know, convinced people and won over some hearts and minds within this session. And if anybody needs some more convincing, you know, as I said, please feel free to reach out, and you know, we can assist them on their journey. I think the second answer, absolutely, that's you know, that's very relevant. And in fact, the top 2 answers, both the content and the way it's delivered, whether that's delivered, you know, online or by a human being. And I think there's an absolute synergy between the two. You know, these two are not mutually exclusive. They should be used in harmony.
Yeah. So yes, thank you, everyone. Please bear with us another 2 minutes. But I want to thank Patrick. Thank you for doing the presentation. Thank you for having this Q&A discussion with me and the audience. It was great. I think everyone attending this learned something today. I will share the questions with you later, Patrick, in case you have time to answer some of them, maybe by email. And then I will now share the screen to also Yeah, so before we end, I quickly also want to mention our upcoming webinars because we have a lot of students here today as well. Our upcoming PADA Youth webinar is next week on virtual reality, innovation and tourism and destination marketing. I think the date is wrong on this, I'm sorry. So it should be March 25, not February 18. You can find all the details on the website. And then the next one would be on April 1st. It's with our Director of Membership and our CEO, focusing on PADA membership benefits and the virtual PADA Annual Summit, which is coming up in April. We'll have the dates on the next slides. If you're interested in our PADA Annual Summit, which is a conference, and we will have it virtual this year due to the circumstances, you can go on our website, find all the information. It's free to register from 22nd to 29th. With that, if you're a PADA member, you're interested in this opportunity to do a PADA Spotlight, feel free to reach out to me and the team at membership@pada.org. And once again, Patrick, please let everyone know where they can reach you if they want more information on today's topic.
So it is info@lvglearning.com.
Yes. We will also share in our recording email, we'll share the information on how you can reach LVG Learning if you want more information. And with that, thank you so much.
We'd also love you to follow us on LinkedIn or something like that too, Rung.
Exactly.
So again, that would be great. And thank you to you, Rung, for being such a great host and giving us the opportunity.
It was a pleasure. So yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you to our attendees, as always. And we'll hope to see you very soon.
Thanks, everyone. It was fun.
Yes. Until next time. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.